Hello, this is Jane, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the June 11 issue of the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The first article is the big headline on the front page, which reads, Closing Arguments. Downtown Park will remain open at night after emotional debate at council. And there is a picture of Carl Loans, who lives next door to the Barbara Hall Park and wants it to be fenced off at night in an effort to curb crime and violence. And this article is by Ben Cohen. A controversial request to consider fencing off Barbara Hall Park in the Church Wellesley Village at night as a solution to increasing violence and vandalism within is off the table. Local councillor Chris Moyes had proposed asking staff to consult the public and report back on the feasibility of closing the park overnight after years of lobbying from people living nearby, some of whom told the Star crime and drug use there have escalated since the pandemic. But after listening to emotional pleas to avoid blocking off the AIDS and trans memorials in the park Tuesday, members of a city committee voted against ordering the study and instead delegated any safety and redesign changes to senior staff with no timeline for a future update. City staff told the Economic and Community Development Committee they are not currently considering fencing off Barbara Hall Park overnight. A plan to renovate the park has been in the works for 3 years and is still in the consultation phase. Construction would start in 2029, though some improvements could start next year. Staff said they want to design the park for safety to the greatest extent possible. This means adding things like lighting, adequate sightlines, and various other design principles. The debate over the future of the park, located next to the 519 Community Center, has divided the local community. Dr. Vera Tarman, a food addiction specialist working adjacent to the park, said she supports fencing it off because her clients get accosted by drug dealers when they come to her home office. This would stop people from living in the park and drawing drug dealers because they're vulnerable and dealers come after them, she said. If they're not there, the dealers aren't there. But others said preserving access to the AIDS and trans memorials must be paramount, and that the park redesign should include features outlined in a plan called the Echoes Project. When you're trying to police a population of people who use drugs, you forget that hundreds of people on those pillars contracted HIV from using intravenous drugs, said Adrian Betts, the executive director of the AIDS Committee of Durham region. They were the early champions in our movement. Betts choked back tears as he described visiting the memorial at night after trips into the city. His best friend, his first 3 boyfriends, his roommate, every man he worked with at the AIDS Foundation in his 20s, all their names are engraved into the stone pillars in the park. You're gonna lock me out? He asked. No, shame on you, I'll climb the fence. Moyes told his fellow counselors he had only wanted to help, and he didn't understand how the narrative shifted against him, painting him as a villain. I don't know what other steps to take, he said. I'm at a loss, quite frankly. I'm going to leave it in the hands of my colleagues to find a way forward. Clearly, when I make suggestions, somehow I'm the bad person here. Carl Loans, who lives next door to the park, said he was disappointed with the outcome. I wouldn't expect anybody who doesn't live in our community to understand the importance of gating off the park at night, he said. I guess the next question is, do they have a better idea? They will now be held accountable for the actions that take place in the park. Councilor Alejandra Bravo from Davenport, who chairs the committee, said any changes to Barbara Hall Park require careful attention and must be handled by senior staff. Public park redesigns are not typically approved by council. What's being experienced here is beyond the work of a single councilor or single division, said Bravo. It's a citywide challenge and a citywide problem. In a statement to the Star Wednesday, city spokesperson Maureen Dasu said staff will continue gathering community feedback. She did not say whether any short-term measures, such as closing the park, would still be considered. The next article is also from the front page, and it's under the byline, Parliament Hill. Liberals table ban on social media for youth. Bill forces firms to enact safeguards or restrict accounts to those 16 and older. And this is by Raisa Patel. Ottawa. The Carney Liberals have introduced a revamped online harms bill that aims to restrict access to social media for those under 16, but leaves many questions unanswered about when and how such a ban would be rolled out. The Safe Social Media Act, tabled Wednesday, would compel social media companies to bar users under the age of 16 from possessing accounts on their platforms, but would allow companies to exempt themselves from those restrictions as long as they can demonstrate that sufficient safeguards are in place to protect children. The bill does not lay out what those safeguards must be, but suggests that some of the criteria platforms must meet could include special accounts designed for children, parental controls, and other unspecified design features. Briefing documents provided to media also referenced measures to reduce the addictive nature of social media and deploy safe search settings. It is not yet known how quickly a ban would be put in place following the passage of the legislation, which is likely to happen later this year, given the Liberals' majority status in Parliament. Platforms captured by the restrictions include traditional social media networks like Facebook and X, sites that offer live-streamed content, and adult services that host pornographic content. The exemption to bypass age restriction rules will not apply to platforms offering adult content. We've seen the tragic consequences of online harm both around the world and here in Canada, Culture Minister Mark Miller said Wednesday. This is unacceptable. We're failing our children. Enough is enough. Our parents cannot face these challenges alone, and the safety of children can't be an afterthought. The legislation also proposes to make AI chatbots safer, but will not ban youth from accessing the technology. The AI tools are not counted as a form of private communications, which are not subject to any of the requirements laid out in the bill. Instead of a ban, AI companies must curb the risk of chatbots conveying harmful information, implement crisis protocols when users share concerning content, and reduce the chances of the tool engaging in harmful behavior. Social media platforms will also face similar regulations, such as improving how users can flag concerning content, being more transparent about the risks posed by their services, and labeling all artificially generated content. The bill will also launch a digital safety commission that would develop standards for AI and social media services, oversee compliance with the Act, levy financial penalties, and manage complaints that online platforms fail to adequately address on their own. The bill comes amid renewed calls from experts and children's rights groups for stronger safeguards and tougher accountability mechanisms for social media companies to protect young Canadians from the dangers of online spaces. Meta and Google said Wednesday evening they were assessing the legislation. Online safety is a shared responsibility, and we've invested heavily in industry-leading protections that help keep Canadians safe when using our products and services, a Google spokesperson said in a statement. A spokesperson for Meta said social media bans are counterproductive, but we are encouraged that the government appears to recognize that online services that provide teens with sufficient safeguards, like we've done with teen accounts and for teens' conversations with AIs, provide real value to young people. The legislation replaces a controversial Trudeau-era effort that never became law, but now reflects a digital landscape that has rapidly changed since Prime Minister Mark Carney's predecessor was in power. Countries around the world have begun implementing and pursuing youth social media bans, while widespread AI use has prompted demands for chatbot crackdowns, particularly in Canada, after it emerged that the person responsible for the Tumbler Ridge mass shooting had been flagged while using the technology months before the attack. While Miller referred to the tragedy on Wednesday, the bill only gives the digital regulator the power to issue guidelines about when companies ought to alert the RCMP about content that might cause death or bodily harm to others. Explaining why he didn't apply youth restrictions to chatbots, the minister said the harms posed by AI tools are not as well understood as those created by social media. They don't have the same social role as social media platforms, so we know very well that these chatbots themselves can be safe by design. They can be subject to requirements that protect children, Miller said. The previous government bill looked at a handful of harms, targeting both adults and children online. Wednesday's legislation tackles a number of those categories, including content that induces a child to harm themselves, content used to bully a child, content that foments hatred and incites violence, and extremist content. While the federal Liberals hope the bill will be robustly debated in Parliament, a number of questions remain about how the legislation will actually be implemented. The government is aiming to have the entire regime up and running 18 months from now, but government officials left open on Wednesday the possibility of a youth social media ban being put in place after the bill's passage, but before the digital regulator, which would oversee enforcement of the ban, was fully established. It was left unclear how a ban would work without a regulator. Miller's office later clarified that the hope is to initiate the ban once the law officially comes into force and the regulator's office is operational. Platforms will also face penalties for violations, with the maximum amount set at $10 million or 3% of gross global revenue, whichever is greater, and even steeper fines if platforms commit more serious offenses. Canada's social media restrictions follow a similar policy in Australia, which puts the burden on social media platforms to deactivate youth profiles and prevent those under 16 from making accounts. Platforms introduced age verification protocols to approve new accounts, but early evidence on the ban's effectiveness suggests mixed results, with youth being able to circumvent restrictions. Critics of an outright ban have argued that the measure does little to force tech companies to improve their safety protocols and to be more transparent about their internal processes. This next article, before I read that, I would like to just quickly remind you, you're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. So the next article is also from the front page, and it's under the byline of Trade War. Trump casts doubt on CUSMA renewal. With talks ongoing, U.S. President ruffles feathers as July 1 deadline looms. And this is by Tonda McCharles. Ottawa. What does a collective cross-border shrug look like? Like this. Prime Minister Mark Carney publicly said little, but privately projected calm after U.S. President Donald Trump declared he is not looking to renew the Canada-U.S.-Mexico agreement on free trade as the July 1 deadline looms for the three nations to recommit to the deal. Nice to see you, Carney said to reporters clamoring for a response. In a virtual meeting with premiers on the heels of Trump's remarks Wednesday, Carney assured provincial and territorial leaders that CUSMA talks were proceeding in a constructive fashion despite the president's comments. Carney told premiers they're going to continue negotiating. They're going to negotiate in good faith. And I think we are going to get through this. The question is, when are we going to get through it? Premier Doug Ford said. Asked if Carney expressed concern to them, Ford said, not necessarily. We've heard, these comments from President Trump in the past. We need to stay focused. In Mexico, Secretary of the Economy Marcelo Ebrard told a news conference that the country's negotiators will continue a second round of formal talks in Washington next week, and said July 1 does not mean the end of the process. July 1 is established as a relevant date to formally begin the review. That is its purpose. Carney's office offered a brief readout of the first minister's meeting. It didn't reference Trump. It said Carney updated premiers on ongoing trade talks with U.S. counterparts. It gave no hint those talks are in any kind of jeopardy, and it underscored the Liberal government's carry-on approach, saying Carney is committed to protecting Canadian workers and businesses and providing certainty to investors, and reaffirmed the importance of a united Team Canada approach. Neither the Prime Minister nor his top trade minister went before cameras later. Behind closed doors, the political mood was sanguine, according to one source. The message was, keep calm, because he said this all along, said a senior official privy to the 1 p.m. teleconference of first ministers. Sources speaking confidentially in order to recount internal deliberations said the premiers took it in stride because they know Trump is prone to hyperbolic public negotiations. At least he's not saying he would rip it up altogether, the officials said of CUSMA. Trump's latest offhand diss of the cross-border trade deal came when a reporter in the Oval Office asked the president how confident he is the free trade pact would be renewed by July 1. and what more Canada could do. Well, I'm not looking to renew it, the president flatly replied. With U.S. trade negotiators in formal talks with Mexico and in separate, though apparently less formal, talks with Canada, Trump went on to reprise his long-standing criticism of the original North American Free Trade Agreement, that's NAFTA, which he signed in 2018 and brought into force in 2020. He said it did one thing that I loved. After 6 years, it comes up for renewal. I don't know that I'm going to renew it because, to be honest with you, the United States does much better, Trump said, adding, we don't need anything that Canada has. We don't need anything that Mexico has. But they need everything that we have, and they should have treated us better. Trump then said the current CUSMA is a great deal for one reason. It gave the right to terminate, suggesting he could one day threaten a complete withdrawal from the deal. I made it, but I had the right to terminate. And you know, with NAFTA, we didn't have the right to terminate. One alternative under CUSMA is that all three partners can agree on July 1 to move to annual reviews while they attempt to continue to renegotiate the terms. Any party can withdraw upon giving 6 months' notice. Brian Clow, a senior Canada-U.S. advisor to former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau throughout Trump's first term, said, "It's completely predictable and expected to hear this from the president." Trump, Clow said, regards himself as a master negotiator and is going to keep the pressure on. It is also to a certain extent a genuine reflection of how he feels about the deal, he added. Clow, who is now a private sector trade consultant, suggested the risk that the U.S. would pull out of the trade deal altogether is very low. He said Canadians should stay calm, just keep their head down, just keep talking. Flavio Volpe, head of the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association, said, "We have to listen to what Trump says, but also remember that he is a tough public negotiator. My immediate reaction is that we did not anticipate a smooth path through the review process and expect more bumps ahead," said Catherine Cobden, head of the Canadian Steel Producers Association. Canada and Mexico formally gave notice last week that they want to renew the agreement, and Canada has clearly stated its priority is to lift U.S. tariffs on Canadian steel, auto, and aluminum, even though various officials have acknowledged that the Trump administration seems unwilling to budge on some level of tariff application. Those sectoral tariffs, up to 50% on Canadian metal and automobile shipments into the U.S., apply globally as Trump attempts to force producers to relocate manufacturing to the U.S. I think we'll see all sorts of ups and downs between now and July 1, said Conservative MP Randy Hoback, who said it is difficult to comment since the government has not briefed the opposition on the status of trade negotiations. But you know, at the end of the day, I think Canadians, Americans, consumers for sure, and American manufacturers want to see a good deal. So it's important to everybody. The next article is titled, TTC Taking Aim at Anti-Social Behavior, and this is by Xavier Mesquita. On Wednesday, TTC Chair Jamal Myers provided a demonstration of the transit agency's automated voice alerting system, the latest safety initiative coming soon to all subway stations. If someone is caught engaging in antisocial behavior, he said, such as smoking or graffiti, a voice over the station's PA system will tell them to stop and threaten to call police. Myers said that the system, known as SAM, that's capital SAM, was being rolled out to make you feel safe and protected. A news release issued the same day said that the system-wide rollout followed successful pilots at Kennedy and Eglinton stations, which had been ongoing since April. SAM enables transit control dispatchers to issue real-time live audio messages directly into subway stations and platforms in response to safety concerns, the release said, adding that the technology could respond to reports from CCTV observations as well as the Safe TTC app. It sends our eyes and ears across the city, Myers said in a Wednesday press conference at Kennedy Station. Smiling, Myers instructed a suited man to pretend to smoke his cigarette before taking a picture of the man and reporting him on the app. 10 seconds later, an announcement could be heard instructing the individual to stop smoking immediately and threatening that police would be dispatched if they failed to comply. When a concern is flagged, a dispatcher can immediately address the behavior through the station's PA system and, where needed, dispatch law enforcement, a Wednesday news release read. It further noted that SAM would allow for safety response without requiring an officer to be present at every location. TTC staff will monitor station activity through cameras and deliver real-time announcements. More than 32,000 cameras now operate in the TTC. In addition to the new announcement system, the release said that the TTC has added 10 new outreach workers to its network and expanded the Toronto Community Crisis Service into subway stations in order to support vulnerable riders. Furthermore, drones are set to be deployed across the network to improve the TTC's ability to respond to incidents quickly and provide situational awareness to the service. The next article is titled, Four-Legged Weed Eaters Return to Don Valley. This is by Gabrielle Hilty. The herd is back. A specialized group of goats is returning to the Don Valley for a third year to help fight invasive plant species with an intensive grazing session. Following a successful pilot in 2024 and renewal the year after, the city's, quote, echo herd, unquote, of goats will graze on Wednesday in the Don Valley Brickworks Park after starting their munching on woody vegetation and non-native species on Tuesday. The public can view the goats at work from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., with city staff holding 3 educational talks on the project during the day, depending on the weather, according to a news release. In Toronto, certain areas of natural parkland, like in the Don Valley Brickworks Park, are maintained as meadow habitats to increase habitat diversity, according to the city. Unmanaged meadows would typically turn into forest, with the encroaching of woody species, or see invasive species like buckthorn or dog strangling vine take over and decrease species and habitat diversity. The prescribed grazing with goats is something the city hopes will do a better job at maintaining the meadow than mechanical equipment, and also comes with unique benefits like lower carbon emissions and noise pollution and reduced impact to ground nesting animals. The goats grazing in the Don Valley come from Goats in the City, a company launched recently by former mortgage broker Ian Matthews, who found himself with a herd of goats while taking care of his father, who had a farm near Orangeville. The City of Toronto was his first customer in 2024. And I must pause once more to remind you that you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Okay, the next article is under the byline of World Cup 2026. Former No Man's Land in the spotlight. FIFA Fan Festival takes over the Bentway, transforming space under the Gardner. This is by Francine Copan. A space that used to be a Toronto no man's land is about to become a World Cup star. The Bentway, an area under the Gardner Expressway between Strachan Avenue and Fort York Boulevard, will help host the FIFA Fan Festival, along with Fort York, welcoming 20,000 people a day, beginning today until July 19. It's a coup for the Bentway Conservancy charity, which burst onto the scene in 2018 when it opened a figure eight skating trail that loops around the massive bents that hold up the elevated highway that slices through the city, transforming dead space into a popular, even beloved destination. We see this as a catalytic moment, said Ilana Altman, the Bentway CEO. It's an opportunity to introduce the Bentway to new audiences from across Toronto and around the world. In the 8 years since the skating rink launched, the Bentway has used whimsical and imaginative art installations and recreational opportunities to capture the kind of local and international attention that other public sites like Sankofa Square, formerly Dundas Square, have been struggling to achieve for decades. I think the people who conceived Dundas Square originally were thinking of Times Square, said urban designer Ken Greenberg, principal of Greenberg Consultants. It's just ended up being a white elephant. I think it has to be rethought. The Bentway skating trail was a bold move and proved what nothing before it had convincingly proven, that it is possible to animate the dark, dingy trench that divided downtown Toronto from the lake when the Gardner was built in the 1950s and 1960s. Events and programming have been original and thought-provoking, while offering residents an opportunity to engage in outdoor recreation. In 2019, the Bentway suspended a giant illuminated replica of the moon beneath the Gardner as part of a week-long arts and astronomy festival. In 2024, 8,000 human-sized dominoes made of aerated concrete were woven through downtown Toronto and toppled across 2.5 kilometers of the city. The Bentway also hosted concerts, mass yoga sessions, and free public art installations. In partnership with city staff, it has developed a coherent civic plan for the entire 7-kilometer stretch under the downtown portion of the Gardner, from Dufferin Street to the Don Valley Parkway, to be undertaken alongside the Gardner Rehabilitation Project. People are now gravitating to the Bentway because of that element of surprise and wonder and playfulness, said Greenberg, who worked closely with the organization in its early years. It suddenly takes a part of the city that everybody thinks they know, and they see it completely differently. One of the central ideas of the Bentway is to break art out of institutions, make it free, and position artists as city builders by asking them not only to engage on issues like the importance of shade in the public realm, but to propose solutions as the city heats up. They become part of a city building team alongside policy drivers and planners, said Altman. And I think that's unique. The Bentway offices are on Fort York Boulevard between BMO Field and Rogers Center. After a Jays game, you see everybody in their blue hats going one way, and when it's a TFC game, everyone in red scarves is going the other way, said Altman, adding that it's provided them with insight. We've begun to understand patterns of fandom in new ways and what types of spaces and experiences are best to complement the sports experience. The charity has been at work with the city for 2 years on the Fan Festival site, which will offer live entertainment, soccer match broadcasts, more than 30 food vendors. The Bentway's offerings will include fan tutorials on dancing, like professional soccer players who have scored a goal, furniture that incorporates soccer balls, and an art installation along the Bents. The city says the Bentway was chosen not because of its location. We knew they would be a great partner to showcase Toronto as an artistic and cultural destination to the world, said Sharon Bolenbach, Executive Director of the FIFA World Cup 2026 Toronto Secretariat. Observers say it's notable that an event like the World Cup, often described in terms of the economic benefit it can bring to the city, may end up having a big impact on a charity. They generally speak about things like hotel rooms, restaurant bookings, car bookings, etc., said Bruce McDonald, President and CEO of Imagine Canada, an organization that supports Canadian charities and nonprofit. They don't often talk about the opportunity for an economic ripple effect for charities and nonprofit. For the Bentway Conservancy to have both people from Toronto and around the world visit, its unique space bodes well for its future in terms of both awareness and potential future support. Visual artist Caitlin Tagubayo designed the images that will bring printed on vinyl and wrapped in 8-foot-tall sections around the Bents inside the Fan Festival site and a work titled Make the World Go Around. People say money makes the world go around, said Tagubayo, whose images depict people meeting to dance and roller skate. To me, it's community that helps the world go around. It's being able to be with people and to enjoy things together with people. And this next article is also under that byline of the World Cup. And the title is Toronto may be short millions in funding costs. City also under fire for reselling tickets at higher prices. And this is by Ben Spur. Toronto won't say whether it has filled a multi-million-dollar shortfall in its World Cup hosting budget, with kickoff for the global soccer tournament just hours away. Meanwhile, the municipality and its mayor are facing criticism over one of the strategies it has used to raise funds for the games, reselling highly sought-after match tickets at a profit. A city official didn't directly answer Wednesday when asked if Toronto has raised enough money to fill the $5 million budget gap, which is attributed to higher than expected costs for the tournament's fan festival. Chief Financial Officer Stephen Conforti would only say in a statement that staff continue to review revenue and expenditure projections for the games. A final accounting will be provided following the tournament, he said. The Fan Festival at Fort York and the Bentway begins Thursday, coinciding with the World Cup's opening match in Mexico City. Toronto, one of 16 host cities in Canada, Mexico, and the U.S., will hold the first of its 6 games on Friday. If Toronto does come up with the funds through new sponsorships or other means, it will have left it down to the wire. Asked about the spending gap last Friday, Toronto's executive director of the World Cup Secretariat, Sharon Bolenbach, said staff were still working on that. Bolenbach told reporters that staff are managing the budget daily and have found savings in some areas, allowing them to reallocate spending within the existing budget. Toronto plans to spend $380 million on the World Cup, with the federal and provincial governments picking up a little more than half of that bill. The $5 million shortfall was created when Chow and council reversed plans to charge for general admission to the fan festival. The plan was expected to help cover $9 million in unexpected festival costs, but faced backlash because it was originally billed as free. The festival, which runs for 22 days, is expected to cost about $25 million. As the games approach, Chow and the city have faced renewed scrutiny over a plan first approved by council in March 2025 to buy up hospitality packages at BMO Field and resell them. Under their agreements with FIFA, host cities had the option to buy 1.5% of tickets to each local match before they went on sale to the public to help with fundraising. Council approved spending $10.7 million on the packages last spring, and in December voted to buy the full allocation of about 3,500 tickets. The 2026 budget included an additional $4.6 million for the program. According to a staff report, the sale of the packages, which included suites, lounges, and tickets to the games, is a key component of the city's strategy to raise money for the World Cup. The city said Wednesday it had sold more than 450 of the packages. Tickets weren't sold individually, and that the program had demonstrated strong financial performance to date. Fewer than 70 of the tickets the city bought remain unsold, but a spokesperson wouldn't say how much money had been raised. The packages were promoted to corporations, members of soccer clubs, the communities of the countries playing in Toronto, and to the public, according to the city. Councillor Brad Bradford, Beaches East York, who is challenging Chow in the October 26 mayoral election, released a video accusing her of scalping tickets and driving up prices for would-be matchgoers. He contrasted Toronto's approach to that of New York City's, where Mayor Zoran Mamdani has spearheaded an effort to give out $50 tickets to 1,000 lucky residents. In Toronto, Mayor Chow used your taxpayer dollars to buy 3,500 World Cup tickets and sell them to corporations which priced out regular fans, Bradford said. Bradford didn't voice objections to the ticket reselling plan when it came before the council. It passed without debate. Chow has defended the plan as sound financial planning and insists the city isn't forcing up prices because the hospitality packages include perks that made them more valuable on resale. The mayor's office said the resale strategy was part of Chow's commitment not to spend property taxes on Toronto's $180 million portion of the hosting costs. Instead, the city plans to use revenue from increased hotel taxes, reserves, commercial rights sales, and fundraising. And before I move to the next article, I must pause and remind you that you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier radio reading service. The next article is under the byline of Northern Ontario. OPP identify man charged in death of constable. 18-year-old faces 6 charges, including first-degree murder. And this is by Xavier Mesquita. An 18-year-old man from Hearst, Ontario, is facing multiple charges connected with the death of an on-duty Ontario Provincial Police constable on Tuesday. In a news release Wednesday morning, the OPP said that Justin Verano is facing 6 charges, including first-degree murder, flight from police, and dangerous operation of a motor vehicle. The accused remains in custody and is due to appear in court on Wednesday. Taryn Bali died while conducting an investigation with members of the James Bay OPP detachment near Hearst, 600 kilometers northwest of Sudbury, police said. Bali was 29 years old. OPP Association President David Sabatini told the Star. The officers were attempting to stop a vehicle as part of an ongoing investigation in the area of Kendall Concession Road 7 and Concession Road 6 at about 12:30 p.m. when one of the officers was seriously injured after being struck and later pronounced dead, according to the release. The officer was identified as Bali, a member of the OPP assigned to the Dufferin Detachment, who was on deployment with the James Bay unit Tuesday. In Canada, an automatic first-degree murder charge is laid if the victim is an on-duty police officer, irrespective of whether a murder is planned and deliberate on the part of any person, according to the criminal code. The accused had fled earlier from a hospital where he was being assessed under the Mental Health Act, according to Carrick. While officers were trying to apprehend the man, our officer was struck by a motor vehicle and killed, Carrick said. No other details about the incident were immediately provided. The force's criminal investigation branch is leading the investigation into the circumstances of Bali's death, in conjunction with the Chief Coroner's Office and the Ontario Forensic Pathology Service. Bali had served with the OPP for 2.5 years, according to the release. Carrick said officers risk their lives every day, and it's tough on members when they lose one of their own. Our officers right across this province are heroes by putting their lives on the line to keep the rest of us safe. Sabatini was at the Dufferin Detachment Tuesday evening and said officers are still coming to terms with Bali's death. Bali is the second on-duty OPP officer killed in the last 6 weeks, following Sergeant Brandon Malcolm's death in a motorcycle crash on Highway 401 in Cobourg, Ontario, on April 27. Malcolm was 33 years old. Ontario's Solicitor General, Michael Kersner, also posted on X Tuesday, offering condolences to Bali's family. As we grieve this tragedy, we remember the extraordinary courage and sense of duty required of those who put on the uniform and serve our province each day, he wrote. And the next article is under the U.S. trade war. Ontario, Pennsylvania deepened ties. Premier Ford and Governor Shapiro agreed to increase cooperation amid Trump's anti-trade rhetoric. And this is by Rob Ferguson and Robert Benzie. As U.S. President Donald Trump saber rattles on trade, Premier Doug Ford and Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro have inked a deal to work more closely together. Ford met Wednesday with Shapiro, a potential 2028 Democratic presidential contender, to sign a 6-page memorandum of understanding the governor said would deepen the work already taking place between the two jurisdictions. I know that to many Canadians, the United States does not feel very welcoming right now, he added. I get that, given the reckless and disrespectful rhetoric coming from our president. hear me on this. I respect Canadian sovereignty. Unusually for such a meeting, the Premier personally greeted the Governor by the grand staircase at Queen's Park for the benefit of media cameras. Prior to his arrival, a reporter pointed out to Ford that Shapiro could be the next U.S. president. 100%, replied the Premier, who has met with the Governor before. The goal of the accord is to increase strategic cooperation on energy, including more electricity generation and transmission, critical minerals, manufacturing, agriculture, artificial intelligence, life sciences, forestry, and the Great Lakes. Pennsylvania has 124 kilometers of shoreline along Lake Erie. I'm excited by our agreement to explore increased cross-border energy trade and take advantage of Ontario's historic investments to build and expand nuclear power generation, said Ford, who hopes to export surplus electricity. Ontario has signed similar agreements with 7 other states: New York, Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, New Jersey, Maryland, and Nevada. The two-way trade between Ontario and Pennsylvania was worth $20.5 billion, that's in Canadian, last year, with Ontario being Pennsylvania's top export customer. But Shapiro noted the Trump trade war has trimmed his state's trade with Canada by about $500 million US dollars, or almost 700 million Canadian. All that chaos at the federal level in the United States is making us all worse off, he said. The confab came hours after Trump suggested his country may not renew the Canada-US-Mexico Agreement, CUSMA, on July 1. We don't need anything that Canada has, we don't need anything that Mexico has, but they need everything we have, he said, and they should have to treat us better. Ford's meeting with Shapiro followed a virtual meeting with premiers where Prime Minister Mark Carney briefed them on the state of the CUSMA talks. Just back from a 2-day trip to Washington, Ford told reporters he repeated his Fortress North America pitch to policymakers and stressed the need for a mutually beneficial trade deal. When you have uncertainty, investment gets stalled, jobs get stalled. New Democrat leader Marit Stiles called the premier's trip a glorified photo op with little to show for it. Doug Ford's Captain Canada peacocking isn't fooling the people back home, Stiles said in a statement. Shapiro is up for re-election as governor in November and is favored in the polls. He's been stumping for his favorite Democratic candidates in congressional primaries across the state of 13 million to boost the party's odds of having more control in Washington following the midterms. The goal is to flip 4 Republican seats. Shapiro, for his part, is coy about presidential ambitions for 2028. The only thing I'm focused on is beating my opponent for governor and helping other Democrats get elected here and sending a clear message to Donald Trump that the chaos, cruelty, and corruption that he's been engaged in is not something that we support here in Pennsylvania, he said recently. And the next article is under the byline of courts. Teens plead guilty in shooting rampage, drove stolen vehicles, opened fire on several locations. Tow truck driver killed in July 2024. And this is by Betsy Powell. Film it, record it, and just hit those 3 doors are among the phrases 3 teenagers captured on their cell phones as they carried out a shooting rampage across the Toronto area in the summer of 2024 that left a 28-year-old tow truck driver dead. On Wednesday, RR and KA, who were facing first-degree murder charges, instead pleaded guilty to multiple counts of reckless discharge of a firearm and accessory after the fact to reckless discharge of a firearm. They were both 15 at the time. The alleged killer, AP, remains before the courts. The Crown and defense have agreed the pair will face the maximum sentence allowed under the Youth Criminal Justice Act, 3 years in prison, though there's a dispute on how much credit they should be given for the time they've spent in custody. The teens cannot be identified under the Youth Criminal Justice Act. They were referred to by initials in court. The first half of 2024 saw a significant spike in the number of tow truck-related shootings and discharges that police attributed to an ongoing territorial dispute involving a small segment of the industry. However, none of that was mentioned at Wednesday's court proceeding. At the time of the arrest, a police source told the Star it's believed the teens were hired to do the shootings by unknown persons. Again, the motive was not included in the agreed statement of facts read in court. Instead, it traced the trio's movements over 48 hours in late June 2024 as they drove through Richmond Hill and Scarborough in stolen vehicles, opening fire on a string of locations: 2 cinemas, 2 auto body shops, a towing company, a takeout restaurant, an elementary school, and a cannabis dispensary. Several shootings occurred late at night, and despite the proximity to residential neighborhoods, no one was injured. Some of the gunfire, however, occurred in daylight and resulted in near misses. When KA shot out the front glass of a takeout restaurant, 2 bystanders were walking nearby and employees were inside. Minutes later, the trio drove to a Scarborough theater where, at RR's urging to film it, KA recorded AP firing multiple rounds toward the cinema doors within meters of an individual seen retreating through one of the doors, Crown Attorney Sharna Reed said, reading from the agreed facts. The boys then continued to a towing company where KA again recorded AP firing multiple shots at 2 tow trucks parked in the yard before KA opened fire at a cannabis dispensary. Then on July 25, 2024, around 9 p.m., the 3 boys were driving in a stolen black Acura in Scarborough near Kennedy Commons Plaza at Kennedy Road and Highway 401. AP received a phone call during which he discussed plans to shoot someone. The next day, AP was behind the wheel of a white Civic and KA was his passenger as they drove around the Kennedy Commons area all afternoon. RR was driving in tandem in a black Acura. At 10:16 p.m., the pair were parked at a Shell gas station on Warden Avenue near Ellesmere Road when a white Mercedes SUV driven by Sulak Shen Selvasingham pulled up beside them. Within seconds, without provocation, he was shot repeatedly by AP. Reed told Superior Court Justice Maureen Forstall. KA did not shoot the victim who drove tow trucks, but he did help AP escape. They traveled to Uxbridge, where they met RR, and together they discarded the Honda's license plates in a nearby sewer drain and set the car ablaze. Sentencing is later this month. And I will end with, you've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the June 11 issue of the Toronto Star. Your reader has been Jane. Thank you for listening.